A quiet move, no announcement, no headlines, and suddenly a question starts spreading across the world. Did France secretly take back its gold from the United States? If that sounds like a small financial update, think again. Gold is not just metal, it is power, it is trust. It is the backbone of how countries feel secure about their future. So when people hear that a major country like France may have pulled its gold out of American vaults, it doesn't just raise eyebrows, it raises serious concerns. Because if one country is doing it, others might follow, and if that happens, the entire system people trust could begin to shake. But here's where things get interesting. The story you're hearing today is not new. In fact, it goes back decades. And the truth behind it is far more layered, far more strategic, and far more important than a simple yes or no answer. To understand what's really going on, we need to step back in time, to a moment when global trust in money itself was being questioned. Back in the 1960s, the world economy was built on a system where the US dollar was the center of everything. Countries trusted the dollar because it was tied to gold. The system gave the United States a strong position because many nations stored their gold in American vaults. It was seen as safe, stable, and reliable. For a while, this system worked smoothly, but not everyone was fully comfortable with it. France at that time started to look at things differently. The leadership began to question whether it was wise to keep so much trust in another country's system. Think about it from a simple point of view. If your most valuable asset is being held somewhere else, how much control do you really have? This question slowly started to grow inside French economic thinking. So instead of accepting things as they were, France decided to take action. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't emotional. It was a calculated and strategic move. France began asking for its gold to be returned, not all at once, but in a steady and clear process. This was not about panic, it was about independence. It was about control. This move sent a strong message to the world. It showed that even a trusted system could be questioned. It showed that countries were starting to think more carefully about where their wealth was stored and who truly controlled it. And most importantly, it showed that gold was still at the center of global trust. But here is something very important to understand. This happened decades ago. It was part of a larger shift in how countries viewed money, power, and control. It was not a secret operation. It was known, discussed, and part of global economic changes at that time. Now fast forward to today. The world is once again full of uncertainty. Economies are shifting, alliances are changing, and people are asking questions again. This is where the old story of France and its gold comes back into the spotlight. When people hear that France took back its gold, many assume it is something recent, something sudden, something hidden. But the reality is more complex. The historical move by France is now being mixed with modern fears, and that combination creates powerful rumors. And these rumors spread quickly because they connect with a deeper concern. People are not just curious about gold, they're curious about control. They want to know who holds power in a world that feels less stable than before. And that is why this story matters so much. It is not just about France. It is not just about gold. It is about trust. It is about confidence in systems that most people never question until something like this appears. So as we move forward, the real question is not just whether France took back its gold. The real question is why this idea is gaining attention again, and what it tells us about the world we are living in today. No breaking news alert, no sudden overnight operation. Instead, imagine a slow, calculated move, one that unfolded quietly over years, not hours. A decision made not out of panic, but out of control. This is where the real story begins. Not with today's rumors, but with a moment in history when one country chose to challenge the entire system. In the 1960s, the global financial system was built on a simple promise. The U.S. dollar was as good as gold. Under the Bretton Woods system, countries around the world held dollars because those dollars could, in theory, be exchanged for gold. And much of that gold was stored inside American vaults, especially in places like Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This gave the United States a powerful position. Trust in the dollar meant trust in the U.S. system. But France saw a problem. Under the leadership of Charles de Gaulle, France began to question this setup. The concern was simple but powerful. If the U.S. could print dollars freely, and those dollars were being used to claim gold, what would happen if too many dollars were created? Would there always be enough gold to match them? And if not, who would bear the risk? From France's point of view, this wasn't just an economic issue. It was about fairness and control. Imagine holding a promise that depends entirely on another country's actions. That's exactly what France wanted to avoid. So instead of continuing to rely on the system, France made a bold decision. It started converting its US dollar reserves into physical gold. This was not done loudly. There were no dramatic speeches every day. It was a steady, strategic process. Shipments of gold began moving from the United States back to France. This move shocked many people at the time. It wasn't just about gold being moved, it was about what that movement represented. A major country was openly showing that it did not fully trust the existing system. And when one country does that, others start paying attention. The impact was immediate. Confidence in the Bretton Woods system began to weaken. If France was asking for gold instead of holding dollars, what would stop other countries from doing the same? This created pressure on the United States because it meant gold reserves could start leaving faster than expected. But here's what makes this moment truly important. France wasn't acting out of fear, it was acting out of strategy. It wanted independence. It wanted direct control over its own wealth. And most importantly, it wanted to reduce its reliance on a system controlled by someone else. This decision helped trigger a chain reaction. Over time, more pressure built on the dollar-gold link. Eventually, in 1971, the United States ended the direct convertibility of dollars into gold. This marked the end of the Bretton Woods system and the beginning of a new financial era, the one we are still living in today. So when people talk about France taking back its gold, they are often referring to this exact period, a time when global financial trust was being tested, and one country decided to take a different path. But here's the key point. This was not a secret move. It was not hidden. It was part of a larger global shift. It was discussed, debated, and understood as a major economic decision. Now compare that to today's rumors. The idea that France suddenly pulled all its gold out of the US in recent times sounds dramatic. It sounds like a repeat of history. But the truth is, what happened in the past is now being reshaped into a modern narrative. And that's where confusion begins. Because when you take a real historical event and mix it with today's uncertainty, it creates a story that feels true, even when the details don't match reality. So before jumping to conclusions, it's important to separate two things: what actually happened and what people believe is happening now. And as we move into the next part, the difference becomes even more important. No official statement, no confirmed report. Just a sudden wave of posts, videos, and headlines all asking the same thing. Did France quietly take all its gold back? That's how modern financial rumors are born. Not from one clear source, but from a mix of old facts, new fears, and a lot of unanswered questions. And once that mix starts spreading, it becomes very hard to separate truth from assumption. Right now, there is no strong, up-to-date evidence showing that France has recently withdrawn all of its gold from U.S. storage. No verified announcement, no confirmed large-scale transfer. Nothing that clearly supports the idea of a complete and sudden move. But despite that, the story keeps growing. Why? Because the idea itself feels believable. Think about the world today. Economies are under pressure. Countries are becoming more protective of their resources. Trust between nations is not as simple as it once seemed. In this kind of environment, a story about gold, real, physical wealth, being moved out of another country instantly grabs attention. And this is where perception becomes more powerful than fact. People start connecting dots. They remember what happened in the 1960s. They hear about rising tensions in global politics. They see changes in trade, in alliances, in financial decisions. And suddenly, the idea that a country like France might want full control over its gold doesn't sound strange at all. In fact, it sounds logical. This is how rumors gain strength, not because they are proven, but because they match what people already feel. Another reason these stories spread so fast is because most people don't really know where national gold is stored. It's not something discussed in daily news. It's not something people check regularly. So when a claim appears, there's no easy way for the average person to confirm or reject it. That gap creates space for speculation. And once speculation starts, it moves quickly. There's also a deeper question hiding behind all this. Where should a country keep its most valuable assets? Inside its own borders? Or in trusted foreign locations? Both options have advantages, but both also carry risks. Keeping gold in another country can be safer in times of conflict, and it can support international trade relationships. But it also means relying on another system, another government, another layer of trust. On the other hand, bringing gold back home increases control, but it also changes how other countries view that decision. So when people hear about France and its gold, they are not just reacting to one country's situation. They're thinking about a much bigger issue: control versus trust. And this is exactly why even an unconfirmed story can create real impact. Markets react to sentiment. Investors react to uncertainty. Even governments pay attention to how these narratives spread. Because if enough people start to believe that countries are pulling their gold out of shared systems, it could slowly weaken confidence in those systems. That doesn't mean it's actually happening on a large scale, but belief alone can influence behavior. This is the power of modern information. A story doesn't need to be fully true to feel real. It just needs to connect with existing doubts. So the real question is not just whether France has taken back its gold recently. The deeper question is why so many people are ready to believe it without clear proof. And the answer points to something much bigger than one country or one vault. It points to a world where trust is being quietly tested again, just like it was decades ago. No gold moved, no vaults emptied, and yet something still shifts, not in physical space, but in the way people think. Because in today's world, perception can be just as powerful as reality. When a story like this spreads, it doesn't stay limited to one country. It travels across borders, across markets, and across minds. Suddenly, the question is no longer just about France. It becomes global. If France is doing it, who's next? Even without proof, that single thought is enough to create pressure. This is where the bigger picture begins. Around the world, countries have already started paying closer attention to where their gold is stored. Some have brought small portions back home. Others have reviewed their storage strategies. These are not dramatic moves. They are careful, quiet decisions made over time. But together, they point to a shift in mindset. The focus is changing from convenience to control. For decades, storing gold in major financial centers like New York or London made sense. It was efficient. It supported trade. It showed trust between nations. But now that trust is being questioned, not broken completely, but tested. And when trust is tested, even slightly, behavior begins to change. Think of it like this. If you feel even a small doubt about where your most valuable asset is kept, you start asking questions. You don't panic. You don't act suddenly, but you begin to think differently. And when many countries start thinking that way at the same time, it creates a silent shift in the global system. That shift is not loud. It doesn't happen overnight. But it builds. And this is exactly what makes the current moment so important. Because whether or not France has recently taken back its gold, the conversation itself is revealing something deeper. It shows that countries, and even ordinary people, are becoming more aware of how power and wealth are managed. Another key point is how fast information spreads today. A single idea can reach millions within hours. It can shape opinions, influence discussions, and even affect decisions. In such an environment, stories about gold, power, and control carry extra weight. Because gold is not just a resource, it is a symbol. It represents stability in uncertain times. It represents security when systems feel unstable. And most importantly, it represents trust. Trust in value, trust in systems, trust in the future. So when a rumor suggests that this trust might be shifting, even slightly, it captures global attention. But here's the final truth. The real change is not happening inside vaults. It's happening inside minds. People are questioning more. Countries are observing more. Decisions are becoming more careful, more strategic. And in this environment, even a simple rumor can act like a signal that something deeper is changing, not a collapse, not a crisis, but a slow transformation in how the world thinks about control, wealth, and trust. So the next time you hear a story about gold being moved, don't just ask, is it true? Ask something more important. Why does this story feel believable right now? Because in the end, it's not just about where gold is stored, it's about who people trust to hold it.